Hey folks, Roland Martin here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Listen, I'm asked all the time what are my favorite lures for the springtime. It's coming up soon. Now, you see me fish a lot of shiners at headwaters and at Lake Okeechobee, and shiners are the deal for the cold weather. But it's coming up on spawning season, and I catch far more fish on artificials when they're spawning than anything else. And so now we're getting back to the real nitty gritty. What's the number one lure that I'd recommend for springtime fishing? Well, let's face it. Hey, you can't beat a Senko. A Senko, there's a lot more to it than just a Senko. But first of all, an unweighted Senko. Okay, spawning season, the fish are shallow. Okay, we're taking a 5/02, that's a 5/0 EWG hook. This is a 5-inch, 297 green pumpkin. Okay, you say the green pumpkin's a big deal. Come in 3/8 of an inch. Through the head of the worm, and okay, come out, bury that shoulder. Okay, remember I'm using 50-pound braid. Bury the hook. Hey, I'm ready to rock and roll. Okay, there's my Senko, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. Now, there's more than one kind of Senko. Now that's for throwing in little pockets of hydrilla. That's for throwing in the shady side of hyacinth patches. That's for throwing in little holes in the reeds. Okay, and that's 50-pound braid. Okay, the fish are shallow. You don't know exactly where they're spawning, but you're looking for little protected holes like that, and maybe you can get them on unweighted Senko. Okay. Now, that's one way. Now, if you're on a great big flat and they could be spawning all over the place and you want to cover some water, here's another good choice of a Senko, and this is called a swim Senko. Let's talk about that. The swim Senko, it's a 5.5 inch, a little bit bigger profile bait, okay, 5.5 inch. And the swim Senkos are a little bit different. You can use the same hook. Okay, you come through the head of the worm about the same way, about 1/2 inch or so. Turn that hook around, come right through there, bury that hook in there. Okay, now you can throw that like a regular Senko. It's a little larger in profile. It's a little larger than the regular 5-inch Senko. It's a little fatter, but it swims. There's a swimming tail, okay? And sometimes when they're just on a flat, sometimes a swimming Senko or a swimming worm is a definite great way to catch spawning fish. It's sometimes the best way to catch a spawning fish. Plus you can cover just a lot of water. Okay, let's keep the Senko in mind because I'm going to come back to it in just a second. Okay, what's my second choice of a springtime lure? I'm going to have to say for right now, there's probably no other lure that's probably producing like this Chatterbait in the headwaters in Lake Okeechobee and some of these other places. A Chatterbait's just a great way of catching fish. Let me just show you what I'm doing with that thing. I'm going to take a Senko, in this case, a Senko, and I'm going to use it for a trailer. I'm going to come in right here, and I'm going to come in on that Chatterbait. That's a 1/2 ounce special. I'm going to come in right there, the head of the thing. Now that's the Brett Height series. That's the good Jackhammer series Chatterbait. It's got a really good weight. That's 1/2 ounce. Now it happens to be braid on here, but sometimes I'll throw it on 17 to 20 pound fluorocarbon. That's what Brett Height and so many of the guys recommend. Using a 7-foot medium heavy action rod. And that's what also the rod I use for my Senko is a 7-foot medium heavy rod. This is the Pro Series rod that my son and I, and Andy Morgan, a whole bunch of us, Mark Daniels, a whole bunch of guys from Favorite, we designed these rods, and it was just the perfect rod. I like it for worm fishing and chatterbait fishing a whole lot. So that Chatterbait complement is great. Now there's a lot of different things you can use on the Chatterbait. There's a lot of different trailers that you can use, but basically the Senko or the boot-tailed Senko is another great choice. Okay, now you can even take on the Chatterbait. Here's another idea. You can take what we call a fluke. This is not a fluke. This is a D-shad. D-shad is a rendition of a fluke that Yamamoto makes, and that D-shad is also a great trailer for the Chatterbait. Okay. So now we've gotten the Chatterbait and worm. Okay. What's the next best lure? You got to try a swim bait, son. I have caught so many fish when the wind's blowing and you're just making long casts across the flats and you don't know exactly where the fish are. You're trying to cover some water. You can make a 50-pound braid, a little bitty 1/8 of an ounce weight on a big 7/0 hook, a big old keel weight, and that's the 4.5-inch heart-tailed grub by Yamamoto. It's just a great lure. It's just I've caught so many 8-pound bass on I can't even tell you. It's just a super lure for springtime bass, because when they're spawning out on those big flats. See, the thing about headwaters in so many of these lakes, there's great big hydrilla flats that'll just go for miles, and you can't see the bottom. You can't see the holes. You're just making blind casts. There's no better way to make blind casts than with chatterbaits and with swim baits. You can cover a lot of water. Okay, so that rod. Now I'm going to use a little bit heavier rod for my swim bait fishing. I'm going to use say a 7.3 heavy action rod or heavier action rod than a medium heavy. Sometimes I'll go to heavy. This happens to be the Emperor series, and it's a 7.3. It's a heavy action, and I can really set the hook good. It's got that big Solace reel with an 8-to-1 ratio reel, and I can tighten that drag down. And sometimes I'll put the UGG buttons on there. See, I call them UGG buttons. These are little caps that I add to any rod, and I'll just slip them on there, and it just holds in. I can really set the hook better, can anchor it into my stomach better. This is a far better way of doing it. So that's a big deal. Okay, swim baits. That's a big deal. I'm a power fisherman. What's my fourth choice? I tell you what wins most tournaments at Okeechobee and what wins most tournaments at Kissimmee. Who wins the tournaments? I tell you who wins them. It's the guys with the big flipping sticks. It's the guys with the big half-ounce flipping jigs like this big Metlock jig and that big Yamamoto trailer. It's guys like that, a whole bunch of guys that have these big 2-ounce weights, 1.5-ounce weights, and these great big trailers. There's a whole bunch of different trailers here. This is one that's this is the what is it? Oh, that's a Psycho Dad. That's a Psycho Dad. It's a great Psycho Dad. It's a great lure for putting behind that 2-ounce weight, because you can punch through the hydrilla. You can punch through the hyacinths. That big old weight goes down. That's 65-pound test braid. Now, as a power fisherman, what I'm going to look for is I'm going to look for the thickest, most matted up, nastiest stuff I can find. And I'm going to take that jig. If it's open, a little bit open, I'm going to take the 1/2-ounce jig. That's a really good compliment. The jig is great, but it doesn't go through the heavy mat. The jig's good for reeds, the good holes in the hydrilla. The jig is good for lily pads. It's good for skipping underneath docks. Okay, the jig is super deal, but it's not the heavy cover like this one. Here's my big and advanced, powerful rod. I've made a big handle, and I've added more length to it, and it's a 65-pound test braided line, that 2-ounce weight, big old Psycho Dad, punching through the hyacinths, punching through the big matted up cover, all the weeds that have blown in. You don't catch many fish. It's not the kind of deal where you catch 10 or 15 fish. You catch just a couple, but they're big. I'm talking about 6 and 8 pounds. So after you've caught a few, sometimes on a worm or a chatterbait, there's nothing better than the middle of the day when the sun's hot and bright and the fish are looking for overhead cover. You got to remember that bass, they have no eyelids. So they're in the sunny days, they're going to be underneath cover. And that's the perfect time of day, say 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock of the day is the perfect time to punch and flip the heaviest cover. Okay, I have one more lure. It's the most fun lure in the whole world. It's the devil's horse. It's the topwater deal. Now here, let me just tell you about spawning fish and what we got here. This isn't really a devil's horse. It's a rendition of a devil's horse. But I got it on 20-pound test monofilament, which I like. This happens to be a handmade one. Okay, this happens to be a 7-foot medium action rod by a favorite. Okay, no problem. The Solace reel, 8-to-1. It's all super good. But here's the deal. Bass are in holes in the hydrilla. maybe in the bed. You don't know where the fish is. You can't see them. Even though I have polarized glasses and I'm looking, occasionally I'll see a bed, but most of the time I don't see the bed. I'm just seeing a hole in the grass. And so I'm looking down for these holes in the grass, and I can see these dark spots, and I'm taking this devil's horse, and I'm throwing it in there, and I'm trying to intimidate the bass, okay? He's sitting there and he's spawning, and now all of a sudden that lure goes plop, and it sits there. And you move it about an inch, you go, doop. He looks at it, kind of threatening, he's intimidated. You move it again, doop. You work it in these holes real slow. I let all the riffles go out about 10 feet, and then just move it about that far. And then just twitch it again. If it's a nice little hole, say 4, 5, 6, 8 feet across, twitch it a third time. After you've twitched it after about 10 seconds now, or 15 seconds, he's not probably going to hit it. So I'll reel it in and throw it in another hole. But I'm telling you what, and these big fish, here's the thing about these I'm talking about big bass. I'm talking about 6 and 8 and even 10-pound bass. You know what they'll sometimes do? Those really big ones, they'll come up underneath it, and they'll just suck it down like a bluegill. And you'll just see just like a swirl on water. It'll be a huge giant bass sucking on that plug, sucking that plug right down. So I like the 20-pound, this is regular monofilament. It's not anything special. It's just regular monofilament. And I throw that a lot on the devil's horse. I just like the way it casts. I don't use fluorocarbon for the simple reason that fluorocarbon sinks. And if I'm fishing a lure like this devil horse real slow, what would happen you don't want to happen is if the lure up here and the line would just sink down like that, then when you pull it, the lure would kind of go down. So you don't want to use fluorocarbon on a slow-moving topwater. Okay. Well, that's my choice. There's a lot of other different ways to catch fish. That's Roland's choice. Hey, and folks, I'm telling you what, I am successful. I catch a lot of fish, particularly in Okeechobee and Kissimmee and headwaters. I catch as many fish as anybody. I'll hold my own with anybody out there. That's my 5 choices. I promise you, if you master them, you'll catch a lot of big fish too. So thanks for watching this YouTube, and hey, we'll see you again soon. Hit that likes button.